In 1892, in Rhode Island, a man named George Brown lost his wife. I guess she had been sick, and then pretty soon after, 2 of George's daughters got sick. Sadly, the daughters had died, and then not long after, his son got sick. His son's name was Edwin. George's friends and neighbors convinced him that digging up the bodies of his wife and daughters could actually save his son's life. George didn't love the idea of having to dig up his dead wife and kids, but he was like, all right, if I have to. So he did. That night, they opened the casket where his daughter, Mercy Brown, was buried. And even though that she had been dead for 2 months, her body was completely intact. She had died in the winter in Rhode Island, and the ground that she was buried in was freezing. So her body was kept in very cold temperatures. So maybe that's why, But a doctor who did the autopsy confirmed that the cold was most likely the reason for her body's condition. But it was too late. People were already in mob formation. They didn't care about science. They didn't care about that. They were like, no, vampires, vampire. So they pointed out Mercy's hair, her fingernails, and I guess they had grown since she was buried. And this is a fun, let me get comfortable. This is a fun little fact. Well, is it a fun fact? Maybe, depending on how you look at it. It's a very common myth that all dead bodies, that their hair and fingernails grow after death. Well, I guess in reality, when bodies begin to decompose, the skin gets dehydrated and it shrinks back from the nails and the hairline. Oh, And this gives the illusion that nails and hair are longer than before. I could see that. That makes sense. I still believe that they grow though. Again, way too late for all that. So the people saw a preserved dead body with long hair and nails and decided vampire. So they cut out Mercy's heart and liver and then burned them. Then after Mercy's dead organs were burned, the ashes were fed to her younger brother, Edwin. I wonder how they prepared it, in a smoothie, a protein powder, or was it sprinkled on top of, what do they eat then? Fish? Soup? Was it in the drink? Did he just eat the powder? Spice jar? I don't know. Well, in the end, Edwin died. Those ashes actually may have been the final nail in the coffin, really. Then in the 1890s, Irish author Bram Stoker first heard about what happened to Mercy Brown and her family. And I guess this inspired him to write about vampires, because clearly people could not get enough. So he wrote a little story. In 1897, the most famous vampire of them all was finally born. You know him, you love him, give it up for Daddy Dracula. He's cute. Would bang. So just like the vampire based on Lord Byron, Dracula was an aristocrat, and he was also a master manipulator. Seeing a theme here. And like the Casket Girls, he traveled below deck. On a ship, my bad. And like Mercy Brown, Dracula's victim, Lucy, is a beautiful young woman whose body is destroyed by her loved ones to ensure she stays dead. Bram Stoker also borrowed from another vampire story, which is a novel called Carmilla. Now, let me tell you about Carmilla. Carmilla is pretty iconic, especially for its time, because it's would you consider it smut? It's kind of like smut, but it's hot. It's about a female vampire named Carmilla, and she seduces a girl named Laura. Super hot, super spicy, highly recommend. But it's again, for its time, I don't know, it's pretty bold. So in the book, Carmilla, she can shapeshift, she's nocturnal, and most importantly, she's a seductress. I know. So here's Laura's description of an interaction with Carmilla. Quote, "And with gloating eyes she drew me to her, and her hot lips traveled along my cheek in kisses, and she would whisper, almost in sobs. "You are mine. You shall be mine. You and I are one forever." Hot. So hot. So just like Carmilla, Dracula was also super sexualized. Sexy depending on how you look at it. He's described as having hairy palms. Now listen, there's a reason. This was because at the time, back in the Victorian era, people believed that if you masturbated a lot, your palms would get hairy. Oh, do you remember, side note, do you remember our graham cracker episode? Do you know we talk about hairy palms in there and masturbation? Yeah, we did. It's been around for a while. Anyway, so Dracula, he must have been a lot, you know what I'm saying? So Dracula was like a walking, talking symbol of what happened if you gave into like your sexual urges. You'd be like this guy. And just like Carmilla, Dracula's lust could corrupt even the most perfect, pure, virginal women. Dracula was a huge hit, okay? And in the 125 years since its publication, it has been adapted in film many, many times. I'm sure you're aware. You know, it's everywhere. They even made what's it called? Sesame Street. Count Dracula? Oh, does he have hairy hands? I can't remember. Also, cereal. See, they use him a lot, is what I'm saying. Nosferatu was a super popular German silent film based on Dracula. Nosferatu was actually so similar to the book that Bram Stoker wrote that his widow, Bram's widow, she sued the filmmakers and she won. Then in 1931, Universal Studios made a Dracula movie starring Bela Lugosi. Now, if you've ever heard someone say, "I want to suck your blood," then they're probably doing an impression that they're aware of maybe, of Lugosi from that movie, which is now almost like 100 years old. Lugosi played the role of Dracula in such a seductive way that from that point on, in pop culture, we think of all vampires as being delicious, horny little I mean, when we think about it, it kind of seems like vampires have boundary issues because, like, they always have to have explicit permission whether or not they can come in. They're asking for consent. We can't be mad at that. But then once they're in, you know, you can't get rid of them. At the end of the day, if you think about it, vampires represent some of humans' greatest fears: sex and death. I'm laughing because it's like, we're so afraid of it, but it's like everyone does it. Everyone does both of those, actually, and we're so afraid of it. I mean, that's why, like, vampires were created in the first place, you know, to explain why disease was spreading. Then, in the Victorian era, when everyone was so sexually repressed, it's not a coincidence that they became perverts, they being the vampire. It was like a cautionary tale against lust. Don't masturbate and don't talk to strange men, or you will die. Have your heart cut out of you, burnt to a crisp, and fed to your little brother. Sweet dreams.